Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Phelan, and I will be your host today for Signals in the Noise, daily insights into trends across the narrative landscape. I'm filling in for your regular hosts, Renee, EVA, and Miguel, all of whom will be back tomorrow with our regular programming. But before we get into the show for today, let's get grounded in who we are and what we're doing here. As we all know, conversations unfold around us, reinforcing ideas, beliefs, and values. We know that narrative is not static, and stories and messages can trickle up and down, from influencers to celebrities, from politicians to everyday folks. And we know that this information and these stories spread both in centralized and decentralized ways. Our team combs through all the news articles, social media content, and websites. We then dissect that content to identify conversations and stories that are trending, that are gaining in volume, and that are holding very important positions in the larger landscape. This allows us to identify the shape and color of how meaning is being made right now in the landscape, and how that can impact how we're doing our organizing and communicating. We call that monitoring the narrative weather. You can think of our team as your resident narrative meteorologists. Today, we're going to have a slightly different format than we've had previously. We're going to jump right into a new segment that we're calling Voices from the Field. And today, we're going to be joined by Jen Soriano. So let's get into it. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Joseph.
It's great to have you here.
I am so happy to be here. I am a very big fan of Signals in the Noise.
Well, Signals in the Noise is a fan of yours. So just so I can introduce you to the rest of our fan base and our loving audience, Jen Soriano is a co-founder of Media Justice, a co-founder of Reframe, and she is a writer extraordinaire, along with wearing many other hats across the movement and the movement infrastructure. So Jen, welcome. We're going to jump right into it today. We invited you here, and we wanted to bring in different voices from the field this week to really sit with this moment we are in and think about what is our narrative strategy, what has it been, and where are we now, and where are we going, right? Mm-hmm. So I just have a few questions for you. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So thinking back before the election, right, before Election Day, what was the biggest kind of worry, and what was your biggest opportunity that you saw as we were heading towards that big day that many of us have been working towards for the last several months?
Ooh, I just have to pick one worry.
Just one.
Highly anxious time. I would have to say that my biggest worry was around wide-scale violence incited by white domestic terror groups, and then pegged onto racial justice activists. Yeah. We've seen it happen again and again. It happened during the uprisings for Black Lives earlier this year. And so I was really worried about another swell in that type of violence, especially if it looked like their hero, Trump, was going to lose. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important for us to actually celebrate the fact that we got through this election period in a relatively peaceful way, under the not just specter, but under the conditions of near fascism that we have been living under, and the way that Trump has tried to stoke those conditions over the past 6 months. I think it is really important for us to just celebrate the fact that there wasn't another wave of something coming to kill us this year. So just want to be real about how much the on the ground security work that a lot of our people have done has contributed to that, as well as some of the narrative discipline that we've been able to exercise as a movement to de-escalate the conversation and not to have it center on those white domestic terror groups, and instead center on celebration. I think the rallies that happened in Philadelphia were such a great example of this, and how there was just such beautiful creativity. The mailboxes, the anti-fascist Elmo, all singing gospel about how fascists about to leave. I mean, I think that those were just some of the many examples of how it wasn't necessarily an accident that we were able to avoid that type of confrontation. It was some of the hard on the ground security work, and also brilliant narrative work projecting joy and victory that helped us avoid that worst case scenario.
Well, I was going to say, I just want to point out, I think this connection that you're making between the projecting of the joy and the combination of the real security work, right? Like setting that narrative container for what would be acceptable in this moment, and what would seem within the reason, right? Trump has spent 4 years setting within reason, within a narrative framework, violence, right? White supremacy, and putting that within a framework of okayness. And I really like what you're lifting out as the use of these creative actions to create a different framework for what is reasonable, what is okay in this moment.
Absolutely. And also what people can be attracted to, because people unfortunately are attracted to sensationalism and the things that kind of can rile up our nervous systems. It's just a human thing that we can be wired for that kind of thing. And it's why disinfo can travel so much faster than just some real good hard facts about what good organizing we're doing. And joy can have a similar effect. When something feels good, it can have as much of an addictive effect as when something feels very sensationalistic and bad. So I think we did a good job with that joy piece.
That reminds me, I was reading something this weekend where I've been hearing about people have been talking about doom scrolling during the pandemic or during the last 4 years on your phones. And I heard someone talk about joy scrolling this weekend around what had been happening. I thought it was a very interesting inverse and tapping into some of what you're saying here. So as we talk more about this, so we talked a little bit about the worry. We heard about the avoidance of that worry, like the different actions and mechanisms that movement folks use to create a different condition. What was the big opportunity you saw heading into Election Day?
The big opportunity is what panned out. It was the opportunity to engage more and more of the American people in the practice of democracy. And I am not sure how many of us anticipated this level of voter turnout. I know that many of us have been working our butts off for it. And to then see the numbers, the highest turnout of voters for more than a century, I think is something, another thing that we should celebrate. And I know that there's a lot of concern over the fact that, sure, there was record voter turnout, but there's millions more people that voted for Trump. And is that really something to celebrate? Right. And obviously it's not something to celebrate, but I also don't think it's something that we should, number one, be surprised about, and number two, be demotivated by, because we know that the conditions that got Trump elected in 2016 have not disappeared. In fact, they've become more entrenched because of Trump being the president for the past 4 years. And as part of the entrenchment of those conditions, I think that we could expect that there were going to be people who would double down for what they believed, what they bought in terms of what he was selling, particularly around supposed economic promise. And so I think that we take it as a lesson around the conditions. And to me, it points towards another need and opportunity, which is, I think that we on the left need to get our story, our narrative about economy in order. And because right now it is absolutely being controlled by the right, labeling everything that we do around the economy as socialist, and obviously having not positive connotations with that term. And that, those negative connotations very real, in a very real way, affect some of the people that would otherwise be on our side. And so that to me is another opportunity in this period, is to get really creative and rigorous around a new narrative for the economy that we're building that will benefit all.
And when you say, I hear you talking about this kind of, there's a couple of things I want to pull apart in what you just said, right? So one, I heard you say that so many people voted for Trump. There's this conversation of like, not everything has changed just because Biden won, right? So just briefly to dig in on that, like, if not everything has changed because Biden won, then why were people popping champagne bottles and celebrating, right? Like, what is the breath that people are taking in this moment? And I'm hearing possibly in the rest of what you just said around the economy and narrative that there's space there that maybe we didn't have before. So I'm just curious if you could talk to both of those things.
Yeah, well, I'm going to model something that I think that we all should be doing, and that also is a successful sort of narrative and action that has been in practice over the election period, which is following the lead of Black leaders, and particularly Black women and femme leaders. So Ashley Woodward Henderson was posting about this, something about this on social media the other day, about how important it is for us to really acknowledge the joy and relief that regular people are feeling around this moment. And it's a, I don't think I can curse on this broadcast, but it's an effing relief. I mean, just on the heart level and body level. I mean, if you can't feel that the weight of a big orangutan is off our backs,
Right.
like, I want you to feel that. Like, I understand we have, lots of other things to work on. There's in our heads, we've got all of our analysis around how to actually push a left agenda. And we just need to allow ourselves to have that sigh of relief. The fact that we are not going to be fighting for 4 more years against more retrenched fascism and white nationalism at the level of, white segregationist violence. I mean, those groups are obviously still there, but to not have their commander-in-chief or somebody who has become their commander-in-chief in the White House is a big deal. It's easier to fight neoliberalism than it is fascism. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're going to do. And that's what we have more space to do now. And so with that clarity, I think hopefully we're going to have a few less fires to put out so that we can set some of our own.
And so you had mentioned this conversation about the economy as a big kind of opportunity moving forward, or a big thing to tackle even. And you just talked about the story of this election, right? What does it mean for those of us in the work and what we're trying to move forward? I'm curious about now that we are in a Biden-Harris elect world, right? We still have to get to Inauguration Day. And also knowing that there was a bunch of other things that happened on Election Day, down ballot races, ballot initiatives, things like that. And we're still seeing recounts and we're seeing not recounts, but counts continue. And we're seeing a potential runoff in Georgia. What is the condition that has shifted, right? The condition of Trump no longer being president. How has that condition shifted, and how is it going to shape not just the electoral environment? So you mentioned the economy as a place for narrative engagement and moving things. What else are you seeing as a next step here, or things we should be looking towards?
I think it's time to switch from focusing on the personalities of the elected officials and the labels of, say, leftist, not leftist, agent of empire versus not, and look at policies and things that we want to become law. And I think it's going to be really easy to kind of fall into this rabbit hole of the blame game. And I get it that for the sake of electoral politics, we need to know the numbers and the demographics of exactly who voted for who. That's really important. But on a larger narrative level, we need to switch to focusing on the issues and the policies that are going to create material change for our communities. And for example, rather than talking about Biden versus the squad, or rather than talking about and sort of blasting the Biden unification project, I think we need to focus on how are we talking about the Green New Deal in a way that actually appeals to people? How do we, I think how do we do the work of communicators, which is, to me, the work of kind of stripping out all of the petty stuff, number one. And then number two, honestly, stripping out the policy wonk stuff and just getting to the basics of how this affects people on a bread and butter level. So how do we start talking about not necessarily the Green New Deal, but about new jobs that are going to pay living wages while also keeping workers healthy and while also keeping their environments healthy, their neighborhoods, their communities, the air that they breathe, the water that they drink. So, and that in a lot of ways is getting back to the story level. So as we think about these larger narratives, what are the stories that we want to tell about workers that would benefit from getting to switch out from a fracking job to actually a healthy green job that is about, I don't know what, building solar panels. And similar to that, I think storytelling around organizing, I've always kind of said that organizing needs a PR campaign, but I think that is actually happening more organically now with this election. We're seeing a lot of clapback against the false narrative that the Lincoln Project, for example, won this election. I mean, come on. Talk about disinfo. Talk about disinfo.
What a horrible story.
Terrible story and factually untrue. And, instead being able to sink into the dramas and the joys of real organizing and being able to tell the stories of what happened in Georgia and Pennsylvania and in Arizona. Shout out to Lucha. Also to Pennsylvania Stands Up, and also to the organizing in the red states. I mean, for God's sake, like, it doesn't matter whether a state was flipped blue or not. It's about the power building, right? So to be able to talk about what all the organizers have done in Florida, to be able to move Florida into another direction for the long game, and also the engagement and power building and leadership development they've done in the meantime, which is the important gain in the now. Those are the stories that we need to lean into, the people power and the policies that are going to make our folks' lives better.
Thanks, Jen. That's such a wonderful place for us to land for this conversation, landing with the story of the election, the story of organizing, the story of power building, and lifting up what you said earlier, the leadership of women of color and Black women in particular in that power building and organizing. So, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. We would love to have you back on another time with Signals in the Noise. And
I would love that.
That would be great to have you. So we're gonna close out for the day. So to everybody here who's joined us today, we'll continue monitoring the narrative weather. Miguel, Renee, and EVA will be back tomorrow with our regular format. And we'd love to hear from you how these different formats are working and who else you'd like to see us interview and have conversations with. So thank you. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Perfect.